a little difficult with all the glitches, but it ended up being pretty good. I definitely prefer it this way now.
I didn't like virtual.
You didn't? No.
No. Sometimes when Miss B was like paying attention to something else, you could eat.
If we were like really tired, then we could, take a little nap.
Frustrated students telling President Biden how they feel about remote learning today, but complaints like those are apparently being ignored. Instead, a new report suggests the Biden administration allowed a powerful teachers union to influence school reopening guidelines. Emails first reported by the New York Post show frequent communication between top CDC officials and the American Federation of Teachers. In at least 2 instances, the union offered up language suggestions that were reportedly adopted nearly verbatim into the final text of the document that the CDC put out. Both the CDC and the teachers union say this type of communication is just routine. The union telling Fox News, quote, "The AFT represents 1.7 million educators, healthcare professionals, and public employees who spent the last 14 months serving on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic. So naturally, we have been in regular touch with the agencies setting policy that affect their work and lives, including the CDC." So there hasn't been a FOIA haul like this since maybe the Hillary Clinton emails that came out during that campaign. Jesse, I'm going to give you permission to make any sort of analogy. I'm assuming that you have one.
I don't, but now I feel like there's this expectation that I need to have an analogy, and I don't want that kind of pressure, Dana. Would you like to repeat it?
No, go ahead.
Okay. I do find it funny that the CDC says there was no political interference. At the same time, smoking documents show political interference, and I'm just wondering if you have to be a liar to work for the government or the government makes you a liar. I just don't know. Right now, it looks like politics is cinema. These teachers' union have to act scared. They have to act reticent to come back, and that's how they get paid. And that's what happened here because there was no risk. And that's not me saying there was no risk. The New York Times says there was no risk. And I'm sick of the New York Times saying the same thing I've been saying, except months later. And then my mom calls me and says, "Did you see, Jesse, what the New York Times said?" "Yeah, Mom, I know. They said today the risk is minuscule to children. Minuscule. They said children don't really catch it. Quote, it's not even contagious there. And they said hybrid learning is hurting and that not opening schools up fully hurts the economy and it hurts working women the most." So I don't know. They're Johnny-come-lately to that. But also, Dana, where's the Republican Party? When you showed the video of Dr. Jill and the president in a classroom hearing from students say how this Democrat policy just destroyed their lives this year, why hasn't a Republican senator or congressman held a press conference at a school like that? I mean, that would have been big. I mean, do I have to do all of the heavy lifting around here? The worst part about the whole story, though, in the research packet, which I read today, it said, well, Biden isn't certain schools are going to be open this fall because, he doesn't have a crystal ball. But at the same breath, he says, if we don't spend $1 trillion on green energy, he knows the Earth's temperature to a degree in 100 years. It's hard to square those.
Let's take a look at that, Sam. This is Anita Dunn, the president's, I think she called her senior counselor, on schools reopening in the fall.
He said probably. He didn't say absolutely. But given the science, if the vaccination program in this country proceeds, if people do go get their vaccines, he does believe that schools should be able to reopen in September and reopen safely following the CDC guidelines. But he said probably.
But Juan, if I were a parent and my kids weren't in school, I would pull my hair out at an answer like that because, remember, the teachers were allowed to go to the front of the line to get the vaccine, but they still said they wouldn't go back to the classroom.
Yeah, I think it's a much bigger issue than just the teachers, though. I mean, in my opinion, Biden's going to have a big problem if the schools aren't open in the fall. I think there's going to be a big fallout economically, picking up on Jesse's point about working women with children need schools open in order for them to get back to work. And they also need daycare and the like. So I think there's a problem there. Now, the caveat that I would add here is I don't think it's just up to the government. I think a lot of it's up to us as the American people. We still have a lot of people who won't get vaccinated. And, that's on them. That's not on the president. So if you're in a community, given that we're now at the point where there's more vaccine than demand for vaccine, if you live in a community, Dana, where, let's say, 30 or 40% of the community is vaccinated, meaning 60 or 70% is not, that might be a problem if you're a teacher, because it means that there is still, a potential spread of the contagion in your district, in your neighborhood.
But if you as a teacher are vaccinated, then it should be okay.
But I'm saying that the CDC says, I think right now it's like 30% of us have had 2 shots.
Okay.
So we're fully vaccinated. I would hope that the teachers are that way. But I can see, this whole argument about unions, I think, is bogus, because if you're an electrician, a plumber, a firefighter, a policeman, or a teacher, your union's job is to represent you. And a conservative watchdog group says, oh, look at these emails. Guess what? All these unions put pressure on politicians, give money to politicians. You may disagree with the teachers, but to demonize them like that's not fair.
I don't know, Greg, I don't know anybody that's demonizing teachers. The CDC took language directly from the teachers union and put it in the guidance. They waited 2 weeks to put out the guidance because they said, remember, Walensky, the woman who runs the CDC, said in her personal capacity that kids could go back to school. That's what the White House said. Oh, that was her personal capacity. But actually, we know now, because based on these emails, she actually really did believe that. But then she waited for this guidance based on, I imagine, some political pressure, and then pulled her personal opinion back.
Yeah, Juan brought up the other unions, and it's a really actually kind of an interesting point. They aren't doing this. They mentioned that the teachers were, for the past, 16 months or whatever, were in the front lines. No, it was it was the police and the fire department, the people delivering our food, the people that work at the supermarkets. They're the ones that are doing all the work, that are keeping us in the media fat. And we can sit here and make comments because all these other people are working and not complaining. And yet there's only one union that is standing out. And after a while, you start wondering what is going on with them. Because it's like if you've ever been involved in a deal, and every time when you're trying to buy a house or you're trying to buy a car, and this person keeps raising objections every step of the way, it suddenly dawns on you that they don't want it to happen. They actually are doing everything possible just to string you along until you give up. Because I don't understand this. All the problems that we basically face right now have to do with teachers' unions. The fact that there's no competition in poor or lower income neighborhoods, that's teachers' unions. These students are stuck with one choice, and they're holding all the marbles. So it's like, imagine having only one cable provider. How that sucks. We would never stand for that. But somehow we're totally cool with these poor neighborhoods having absolutely no competition. And so this is the consequence, is that you can't do anything. People aren't, there's no option for them. We have to change this. We have to use this crisis. And by the way, this is another crisis. Biden now has 2 major crises, but no one wants to use the C word with him. If it was Trump, they would call it a crisis. But right now, we are playing down huge issues because it's a teachers union who have inserted themselves into this process because they can. Why can they? Why do they have the power? I don't understand this.
And Katie, I just want to show this graphic real quickly. This is gender equality in school and how the lack of normal schooling is hurting mothers. So you see there in terms of women with young kids not being able to get back to work, right? And you wonder, for a White House like this, who wins out? The women or the teachers union?
Well, the teachers union and big government proponents. So now they're extorting even more money, again, by saying, well, if we want women to get back in the workplace, we have to pass this new human infrastructure bill to the tune of almost $2 trillion in order for women to go back to work, while they ignore the fact that they have allowed the teachers unions to control, now we know, CDC guidance when it comes to kids going back to school. Dana, if you look at the dates, okay, so February 3rd was when Dr. Walensky came out during an official White House press conference on COVID and said teachers do not have to be vaccinated for teachers to go back to school safely. The next day, Jen Psaki comes out and says she was speaking in her personal capacity. And now we know that's because they were allowing teachers unions to guide the science that they claimed that they were following when it comes to school reopenings. And so they're following the money here. They used to say that we had to pass the COVID relief bill, which was $2 trillion, in order for teachers to get back in classrooms so that they could pay for ventilation, they could safely get back to school. Well, that passed. So now they're saying, well, if you want women to get back in the workplace, you have to pass another human infrastructure bill for government-paid childcare. So this is all about growing the government, expanding the government, and for Dr. Jill Biden to go to that school today as a teacher who claims that she cares about kids and to listen to that and not come out and say teachers unions are holding these kids hostage, they're holding their families hostage, and they need to get back to school is pretty cowardly, considering that she claims to stand up for the best interests of her students. She has more in terms of responsibility here than a lot of first ladies do.
The teachers union actually broke records in terms of the political donations that it made in the first quarter of this year.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.